If you've been dealing with acid reflux, respiratory issues regarding reflux, or any sort of regurgitation issues, then you need to know the top 13 causes that lead to that issue starting in the first place. Otherwise, you risk becoming dependent on medication, going this vicious circle of just managing the symptoms and never actually getting to the root cause and discovering true resolution. And so in this video, I'm going to teach you those 13 top leading causes. That way you can resolve what got you there in the first place without needing so many medications. Really quick, I'm Dylan. Over the past 4 years, I've helped hundreds of people reverse their chronic health issues, get off medications, and really start thriving again with their health. I make these videos so that you have the education that my parents lacked when it comes to preventing lifestyle-based health issues. And when it comes to resolving those things and getting off meds and all those crazy things, really it boils down to just understanding the root causes. So that's what I want to give you here today. When it comes to acid reflux, the root cause is that your LES, the lower esophageal sphincter, is starting to weaken and fail. Let me bring up a diagram so you can see. And you have here the lower esophageal sphincter, the LES, it's the valve that separates the stomach from the esophagus, and it contains all the stomach acid so it doesn't splash up in the esophagus or would tend to cause damage. And so this happens over time where the sphincter starts to weaken. And so you probably noticed that it started with, one episode every once in a while, maybe once a week, and you could just pop a Tums and it would go away. And then it tends to get worse over time as that sphincter starts to weaken. And so you start to have more and more episodes, they get more and more severe. Maybe more and more foods start to trigger it, or you have to be on stronger and stronger meds. And so because that sphincter continues to get weaker and weaker, you're dealing with all the symptoms of that. And so the bottom line is not an acid issue. Your body is designed to have that really strong acid in your stomach. The problem is that it's splashing up and that sphincter is allowing that. It's basically getting weaker. And so that's what's driving all the symptoms, all the silent reflux symptoms, that's what you're dealing with. And so that's really what the focus needs to be. So the real question is, what causes the LES to weaken over time? Because if we could resolve that and get some of the LES function back up to par, then you wouldn't be so dependent on medication, you wouldn't be so triggered by so many foods, and so you could tolerate a lot just more flexibility in your diet. And you might even eliminate episodes altogether. I've definitely seen that happen in practice. Now, so let's go cover those top 13 causes to acid reflux. And as I go through in detail each of these, if you want more detail, or if you want the research behind all those things, or if you want a structure and blueprint to follow to resolve and fix these root causes, then you can download my ultimate guide for acid reflux. It's in the link in the description below. Just fill out the form, I'll send it right your way. Cool, we can start by breaking the causes into two kind of broad groups. The first group is pressure builders, and the second group is sphincter disruptors. And it's helpful to think about it that way. Now, the pressure builders are anything that increases the intragastric pressure within your abdomen and your stomach. So basically, anything that increases pressure, in your stomach and abdomen is going to force that sphincter to work harder, essentially, to contain your stomach contents and do its job. And so over time, if you have a lot of these pressure builders, it can wear out the LES and start to weaken and allow acid to escape into the esophagus. And the first one is weight. So if you can imagine, if you carry excess weight, then you're going to have the force of gravity essentially is going to push down on your abdomen. It's going to create more pressure on your stomach, and especially if you carry that weight around the midsection, it's just going to increase the pressure and force your LES to work harder. So that's the first one. And so if you have a history of weight or carrying that weight, that's probably why one of the big recommendations is to lose weight, not just for your sphincter health, for everything, right? Number two is bloating. Okay, and that can probably be pretty self-explanatory. When you have a ton of gas in your stomach or in your intestines and building up in your colon, then that's going to force everything up and create pressure on your stomach, which then your LES has to work against, right? Now, there's a lot of also research behind this where there's a big connection between chronic acid reflux and having SIBO, which is that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so if you have other digestive issues like that, that can cause the acid reflux, or it could just be kind of a downstream result of it too. Number 3 is constipation. And with constipation, you can imagine your entire digestive system essentially as one long tube, with one side being your mouth and the other side being your bumhole. And when you're constipated, you're basically plugging out one side and it's backing up and creating pressure on the other. You can kind of imagine it like, clowns that make those balloon animals. Well, that really long balloon, if you were to tamp down on one side, it would increase the pressure on the other side, right? And so that's kind of what happens with constipation. That extra pressure can, really build and obviously force the LES to work harder, but it can also, increase the risk for hernia. And especially hiatal hernias will kind of destroy the structure that supports the LES, making it harder for it to do its job. And so if you have history of constipation, a lot of people don't even know they're constipated. And so if you want more information on that, you can go to our video here. But that can be a large driver setting you up for creating the environment essentially for acid reflux to start. Number 4 is stress. And with stress, it affects us in a lot of different ways, but when it comes to pressure building, a lot of people hold their stress in different parts of the body. Some people hold it in their jaw and they clench their jaw when they're stressed out. Some people, I know like my sister, holds it in her neck. If you hold it in your stomach via the abdominal muscles, then anytime you're stressed out, you might not even know it, but that's creating pressure in your stomach, and then the LES has to resist that too. So there's a number of ways that stress impacts. We'll cover that a little bit later. But the way it builds pressure is usually through that method. Number 5 is carbonated beverages. And so if you're like me and you're addicted to seltzer water, or you just tend to drink a lot of carbonated beverages, then this can be a pressure builder, because anytime you drink that beverage, it's off-gassing and releasing the carbon dioxide in your stomach, and it's then building the number of gas in your stomach and pressing on that LES. Now, I find it hard to believe that this alone could cause acid reflux. Usually all of these kind of pressure builders work together over time, right? It's not just like, oh, I drink carbonated, like a bubbly soda or water and all of a sudden I have acid reflux. It's not like that. But that's one of the things that builds pressure, and especially if you already have acid reflux, that's why they recommend avoid these things, because it creates pressure and then the LES has to resist it, and it's going to just encourage more episodes too that way. Number 6 is eating large meals. And when you eat large meals, it tends to distend your belly and your abdomen, and that's going to put pressure on the LES to then contain all that food. And as the stomach stretches, it's just going to force the LES to have to work harder, right? And so, again, this is one of those things that kind of over time can affect you. And that's also why they kind of recommend to avoid eating huge meals, because again, it's going to tend to weaken the LES, allow more episodes. And so that's one of the behavioral modifications that they typically guide people to do. And number 7, and the final pressure builder, is pregnancy. And that's hopefully pretty self-explanatory at this point. It's putting a lot of pressure on the abdomen, the body in general, honestly. And so that's going to build pressure. And so that over time can be a factor in why your LES is weakened. So that's it for pressure builders. The next is sphincter disruptors. And sphincter disruptors are anything that inhibits the proper functioning of that LES sphincter. And so first on that list, but number 8 total on our total list of causes, is certain foods. And this is kind of a little bit of a broad group, but at the top of the list of certain foods is definitely fatty, oily, greasy, fried foods, okay? Those things, you can imagine them, at least the way I imagine it, is how grease kind of coats your hands or a surface and it makes it slippery? Well, it's the same thing when you eat these foods and they coat your esophagus and the sphincter. It just makes it really hard for that sphincter to get a purchase on closing the valve, or otherwise just relaxes it in general. And so that's the kind of way I imagine it. That gives me a visual on how these things affect my body. And so fatty foods are a big one. Let's set those aside in kind of their own group for now. We also have other foods like chocolate, mint, especially peppermint. We have spicy foods, onions, citrus, tomatoes, These sorts of things have all been implicated to potentially increase or loosen the LES when you eat them. However, there's a lot of evidence on both sides showing, basically debating whether that's actually the case, if that's actually the mechanism. But it's useful to put here because, they definitely can cause the LES to relax and cause more reflux symptoms for general. And so if you're just starting your acid reflux journey, then these are good things to avoid for sure. But definitely the fatty foods are something that definitely causes the LES to weaken over time and to loosen when you eat it. Now, number 9 on our list is caffeine. And I'm a big coffee drinker, or I used to be at least, not necessarily against caffeine, but it is technically a pretty strong psychoactive drug. And so it has a lot of effects on the body, one of which is to cause the LES to spasm a little bit more. And so people will find when they drink coffee, they get more acid reflux. So that's definitely one to keep in mind. Number 10 is alcohol. And alcohol has a ton of different effects on the body, just like caffeine has a ton of effects. However, alcohol tends to relax, tends to inhibit a lot of nerve signals, and so it can inhibit the proper functioning of the LES. It can cause it to relax as well. And so alcohol, doesn't matter which type, okay, if it's hard alcohol or wine or beer or a different special type of hard alcohol, if it's alcohol, it's going to have that effect on the LES. So that can be a cause as well. Number 11 on our list is the gut-brain axis. And maybe you've heard about this before, but the gut is often called our second brain. And there's good reason for that because, first of all, there's a ton of nerve endings in the gut. We don't even think about it because it just happens automatically, right? But there's also this bidirectional link between the brain and the gut, meaning that when the gut is inflamed or disrupted, it can change the mental and emotional state in your brain. But vice versa, the brain can also, change the state and function of the gut. So for instance, if you're feeling emotions like anger, sadness, depression, frustration, stress, or even happiness, those emotions have an effect on how the gut operates and functions and does its job. That's really important to consider because not only can stress impact you through a pressure builder, but it can also disrupt the function of that sphincter. And so commonly people will come and they'll notice that bouts of stress or anxiety or depression, affect their reflux symptoms or cause more episodes or more symptoms in general. And so that's because of that gut-brain axis. And so one of the things to keep in mind is, that can complicate the picture. If you're trying to figure out a whole bunch of food triggers or you're trying to figure out, how to manage this, then that can make it a little bit more difficult because you have to calculate that in, right? And second, if you have a long history of stress or anxiety, that can be a complicating factor that not necessarily is driving it, but is definitely needs to be taken care of to get full resolution, right? And so you have to look at it holistically, not just necessarily what food goes in, what food stays out. Number 12 is medications. And there's a long list of medications that can affect acid reflux and especially inhibit that sphincter function. We don't have time to go through all of them here. You can either ask your doctor or read the side effects to the medications that you're taking, or you can download the guide. I detailed all of them out in the Ultimate Guide, which you can find in the description. But keep in mind that medications can absolutely start acid reflux, drive it, all those things. And now we're on 13 and our final cause. And it's kind of a bonus one because it's a double whammy. It's both a pressure builder and it's also been shown to be a sphincter disruptor. And I wonder if you can guess it, but that 13th one is smoking. Now, if you are a smoker compared to non-smokers, you will have just a chronically weaker LES function in general. That's been shown through research. And it's first of all a sphincter disruptor because the act of smoking, the chemicals, whether it's the nicotine and the other things in tobacco or in cigarettes in general, will tend to relax the sphincter and cause more acid reflux issues. But it's also a pressure builder because deep inhaling, increases the pressure intragastrically, as well as coughing. Coughing does that too. And so It's kind of a double whammy in that sense. It also actually inhibits the production of the saliva to have the bicarbonate it usually does. So basically by smoking, it can change the composition of the saliva to not have so much buffering ability, which is actually one of the natural protections of the esophagus to the stomach acid. So that can also affect it that way too. Basically, it applies here as it applies everywhere else in health. If you smoke, one of the best things you can do for your health is to stop smoking. So there you have it. There's the top 13 causes for acid reflux. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If it was, please like and subscribe. That tells YouTube that it's a good video and to push it to more people like you that need to see it. There's a couple different ways if you're looking for more help that you can find it. First of all, you can go watch more of our videos. But also the best way that I can help you is if you download the Ultimate Guide for Acid Reflux. We've talked about a lot of the reasons why an LES fails in this video, but in that guide, I can go into way more detail about things that exacerbate acid reflux once it starts, and as well as I put forward a clear blueprint and structure to follow to actually resolve these problems at their core. And so if that's what you're looking for, then you can go to the link in the description, click the link, fill out the form, and I'll send it your way pronto. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.